Rain hammered the highway as a young factory worker pulled into a lonely gas station after midnight. She thought she was helping a frightened woman escape danger. But 10 minutes later, the stranger was laughing while a car full of men hunted them through the storm. Every word at the gas station had been a lie. Every movement had been planned from the beginning. The terrifying part wasn't the chase through the dark industrial roads. It was realizing she had been selected before she ever stepped out of her car, and one desperate split-second decision would determine whether she survived until sunrise or disappeared forever into the rain. It was the fall of 1993. In a dying industrial town where the factories never truly slept, and the air always smelled like smoke, oil, and wet concrete. She had just finished another brutal overnight shift at the plastics factory on the edge of town, after spending 12 exhausting hours lifting heavy molds beneath flickering fluorescent lights that made every worker look half dead by sunrise. Her hands burned, her back ached, and exhaustion sat deep inside her bones. She was one of the only women working that shift, and years inside that environment had taught her harsh lessons about survival. Never appear weak, never show fear, never let anyone think they could intimidate you. Outside the factory gates, freezing rain poured from the black sky, while workers hurried across the parking lot toward rusted cars coated in mist and steam. She tossed greasy gloves onto the passenger seat of her battered Chevette and collapsed behind the steering wheel while windshield wipers scraped across the glass. For several seconds, she simply sat there staring into the storm while trying to gather enough energy to drive home. Then she noticed the gas gauge resting dangerously close to empty. Frustration instantly hit her. The last thing she wanted was to stop for gas in the middle of the night, especially near the abandoned industrial district outside town. But she knew she would never make it home otherwise. Several miles ahead sat a tiny gas station beside old railroad tracks and empty warehouses. She started the engine, pulled onto the wet highway, and unknowingly drove straight toward the worst mistake of her life. The gas station appeared through the rain, like a weak, dying beacon surrounded by darkness and silence. Half the fluorescent lights under the awning flickered constantly, while reflections danced across puddles covering the cracked pavement. The tiny building looked almost abandoned, except for a glowing open sign buzzing faintly behind the dirty front window. No customers were visible anywhere, and no employee stood outside near the pumps. Only the sound of rain hitting metal roofs filled the empty night. She slowly parked beside an old pump and shut off the engine while cooling metal ticked beneath the hood. Something about the place immediately felt wrong in a way she could not fully explain. Maybe it was the unnatural silence. Maybe it was the empty parking lot. Or maybe it was the strange feeling that someone was already watching her from the shadows. When she stepped out into the cold rain, wind sliced through her work jacket instantly. She shoved the nozzle into the gas tank and glanced around the station while rubbing tired eyes. That was when she noticed the woman standing beneath the awning near the building. The stranger looked young, maybe mid-20s, with soaked hair hanging across her face and nervous eyes constantly darting toward the darkness beyond the station. At first glance, she seemed harmless and terrified. Slowly, the woman began walking toward her through the rain, while hugging her arms tightly around herself. "Please," the stranger said in a shaky voice. "Can you help me?" The factory worker froze beside the gas pump, while instinct quietly warned her to leave immediately. Still, the woman looked genuinely frightened and desperate. "What happened?" she asked cautiously. The stranger pointed toward the far edge of the property. That was when she noticed the old light green sedan sitting motionless in the shadows near a dumpster with dark silhouettes barely visible behind rain-covered windows. Rainwater dripped from the stranger's face as she stood trembling beneath the flickering gas station lights, constantly glancing toward an old green sedan parked in the shadows near a dumpster. She claimed she had been fighting with her boyfriend at a nearby bar before storming out alone, and now the men inside that car had been following her for miles. "They've been watching me," she whispered nervously. The factory worker looked toward the sedan and saw several shadowy figures sitting silently inside while the engine idled beneath the storm. Every instinct warned her to leave, but the terrified woman begged softly for a ride home. After a long hesitation, she sighed and said, "Get in." Moments later, the green sedan's headlights suddenly flickered on behind them. At first, the drive felt awkward, but mostly normal while rain hammered against the roof and windshield wipers thumped rhythmically across the glass. The stranger gave vague directions through unfamiliar back roads lined with warehouses, junkyards, and abandoned machine shops, where almost no other vehicles passed by at that hour. Every few seconds, the woman twisted around in her seat to stare through the rear window, as if expecting someone to appear behind them. "You okay?" the driver asked quietly, while gripping the steering wheel tighter. The stranger ignored the question completely and continued staring into the darkness behind the car. Something about her behavior no longer felt like fear. It felt more like anticipation. "Put your seatbelt on," the factory worker said after several minutes of silence. Again, the stranger ignored her. Seconds later, headlights appeared far behind them through the rain. The factory worker immediately recognized the shape and color of the same green sedan from the gas station, slowly pulling onto the road behind them. Her pulse quickened instantly. "They followed us," she muttered under her breath. The stranger kept staring backward without answering while the sedan slowly gained distance. Through the rearview mirror, the driver could see vague silhouettes shifting behind the windshield. At least 3 men sat inside the car, maybe more, but rainwater blurred their faces too heavily to identify anyone clearly. "Is that your boyfriend?" the driver asked carefully. The stranger slowly turned toward her for the first time in several minutes, and something cold suddenly appeared behind her eyes. "You got any money?" she asked flatly. The abrupt change in tone sent chills through the driver's entire body. "What?" she asked in disbelief. "Your purse," the woman snapped impatiently. "Where is it?" The fear in her voice had completely vanished. Now she sounded irritated, aggressive, almost annoyed that the situation was taking too long while the green sedan continued creeping closer through the storm. The stranger leaned back against the passenger seat with a cold smile spreading across her face. Completely different from the terrified woman at the gas station only minutes earlier. "You need to give me some money right now," she said flatly, while glancing toward the headlights growing brighter behind them. The factory worker felt adrenaline rush through her body as the truth slowly became impossible to ignore. "I don't have much cash," she replied cautiously, trying to stay calm. The stranger smirked. "That's okay," she whispered. "My boys can help you look." Behind them, the green sedan accelerated closer until its pale headlights flooded the rearview mirror. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The crying act had been fake. The helpless story had been rehearsed. The men inside the sedan had always been waiting. She had been chosen the moment she stopped to help. The stranger suddenly laughed while staring through the back window. "There they are," she whispered excitedly. "My boys are gonna mess you up." Terror crashed through the driver as dark roads stretched endlessly ahead. The sedan moved even closer until faces became visible through the rain-covered windshield. Then the stranger leaned toward her and hissed, "They're gonna hurt you bad." At that exact moment, fear turned into survival instinct, and the exhausted factory worker realized she would have to fight to make it out alive. Fear slowly transformed into cold calculation, while the factory worker forced herself to breathe evenly and keep both eyes focused on the road ahead. Panicking would get her killed, and she understood that immediately. Every detail from the night suddenly rearranged itself inside her mind with horrifying clarity. The empty gas station, the sedan parked in the shadows, the silent men sitting inside waiting patiently, the frightened woman pretending to need help. None of it had been random. This was organized, planned, predatory. The realization made her blood run cold because it suggested these people had probably done this before. The stranger beside her no longer pretended to be nervous. She sat comfortably now, while occasionally glancing backward at the approaching sedan like someone waiting for friends to arrive at a party. "You should probably pull over," the woman said casually, while smiling faintly. The driver ignored her and continued accelerating through the rain, while industrial buildings rolled past outside like black skeletons beneath the storm. Then she suddenly remembered something important. Earlier during her shift, she had used a box cutter to open heavy plastic wrapping at the factory and forgotten to return it afterward. The tool still sat inside the driver's side compartment, only inches from her hand. She did not reach for it yet, but the thought remained quietly inside her mind, like a hidden weapon waiting for the right moment. Behind them, the green sedan accelerated even closer until it rode only a few car lengths behind the bumper. Through the mirror, she could now clearly see movement inside the vehicle. Men leaning forward aggressively, faces watching her, shadows shifting beneath the pale headlights. The stranger laughed softly again while staring at the terrified driver. "You're screwed," she muttered with complete confidence. But beneath the fear, another emotion slowly began rising inside the factory worker. Anger. These people believed she was helpless. They believed fear would make her obedient, and that assumption was about to become their biggest mistake. Ahead through the storm, glowing traffic lights appeared above a large intersection near the edge of town. For the first time since leaving the gas station, the factory worker spotted other vehicles moving nearby, and an idea immediately formed inside her racing mind. The light ahead was green, but as she approached, it slowly shifted toward yellow. Behind them, the green sedan was dangerously close now, its headlights flooding the rearview mirror. The stranger noticed the changing light too and gripped the dashboard nervously. "Don't do anything stupid," she warned sharply. But the driver had already made her decision. Her foot slammed onto the accelerator, and the small Chevette surged through the intersection just as the light turned red. Horns exploded from every direction while cross-traffic rushed into the intersection, blocking the green sedan behind them. For the first time all night, the men chasing her had been delayed. The stranger panicked instantly. "What are you doing?" she screamed. Then came the second part of the plan. Without hesitation, the factory worker stomped on the brakes with all her strength. Tires screamed across the wet pavement as the car jolted violently. Since the stranger still refused to wear a seatbelt, her body launched forward uncontrollably. Her face smashed against the dashboard with a sickening crack that echoed through the car. For one terrifying second, silence filled the vehicle except for rain hammering the roof before absolute chaos erupted. Before the stranger could fully recover from smashing into the dashboard, the driver ripped open the side compartment beside her seat and grabbed the factory box cutter with trembling hands. The blade snapped outward with a metallic click that instantly changed the atmosphere inside the car. The stranger looked upward in complete shock while blood trickled down from her forehead where she had slammed into the dashboard seconds earlier. Everything about the situation had changed instantly. Only moments ago, the stranger believed she controlled the terrified woman behind the wheel. But now she stared directly into the furious eyes of someone fighting desperately for survival. The factory worker screamed louder than she ever had before in her entire life. "Get out of my car!" The blade hovered inches from the stranger's face, while rain pounded against the windows around them. "You crazy bitch!" the woman shouted while trying to push herself backward against the passenger door. But fear had transformed the exhausted driver into something almost feral. Years of surviving rough factory shifts beside aggressive men had hardened her instincts in ways the attackers never expected. She shoved the stranger violently against the door, while gripping the blade close enough to keep her trapped. The woman clawed wildly at her arms while trying to shove the weapon away. Outside, distant headlights moved through the intersection behind them, meaning the green sedan would not remain trapped forever. Time was running out rapidly. The driver screamed again while striking the stranger across the face with her forearm and yanking the passenger door handle open. Cold rain exploded into the car immediately. The stunned woman lost balance and tumbled sideways out onto the wet pavement beside the curb. For one brief second, both women stared at each other through the storm. One looked shocked that the plan had failed. The other looked ready to kill, if necessary. Then the factory worker slammed the door shut, shifted gears, and floored the accelerator into the darkness. Her body trembled violently as the Chevette raced through rain-soaked streets. Every distant headlight looked like the green sedan returning for revenge, and the stranger's laughter echoed endlessly inside her mind. She could not stop wondering what those people planned to do if they caught her. The uncertainty terrified her more than any answer could. Alone after a brutal factory shift, she had nearly walked into a carefully planned trap simply by helping someone who appeared helpless. When she finally recognized familiar streets near her sister's neighborhood, relief mixed with lingering terror. Deep down, she knew one terrifying truth. If that traffic light had changed differently, she might never have escaped alive. When she reached her sister's house, rain still dripped from the damaged Chevette while steam rose from the hood. Her hands shook violently as she stumbled to the front door, clutching the box cutter. The moment her sister saw her terrified face, she knew something horrible had happened. Inside the kitchen, the exhausted factory worker tearfully explained everything. The gas station, the frightened stranger, the green sedan, and the terrifying chase through the storm. Horrified, her sister demanded to know why she stopped to help a stranger. She had no answer. That night, they locked every door, closed every curtain, and waited fearfully for sunrise. Years later, the memory of that stormy night still haunted her. The factory closed, the old Chevette disappeared, and the town slowly changed. But certain things always brought the fear rushing back: empty gas stations, green headlights, and strangers asking for help on lonely roads. In nightmares, the sedan always caught her before the intersection. What disturbed her most was how normal the stranger had seemed. Scared, helpless, and human. That night taught her a terrifying truth. Dangerous people do not always look dangerous. Sometimes they smile, cry, and pretend to need help. Since then, she has trusted one lesson above all else. Instincts exist for a reason. Even decades later, she still remembers the stormy roads, the green headlights, and the stranger laughing beside her in the car. The woman's calm confidence made it clear the trap had been planned from the beginning. One yellow traffic light became the difference between survival and disappearing forever. If she had hesitated for even a second, The sedan might have caught them. Since that night, she avoids isolated gas stations and never ignores her instincts. She learned a terrifying truth. Danger does not always appear threatening. Sometimes it smiles politely, pretends to be afraid, and waits for kindness to lower someone's guard before leading victims into darkness. Some strangers truly need help. Others are hunting for someone willing to stop. On one stormy night in 1993, a single decision separated survival from disaster. Trust your instincts. Stay aware, because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones pretending to be afraid.